Hello RC fans, Racing 393. This is part 3 of my LMP12 beginner's guide, and this time in episode 3 we're just talking about springs. So we're talking about the front suspension springs, the rear pod, the rear droop spring, and the 2 side pod springs. And we'll just go over things that I found out during my beginnings of starting LMP12. I'm hoping to continue racing indoors in the not too distant future. So, on to the video. Wow, 94% humidity. 94%? I've never seen that high before in here. What's that mean? Have I got a roof on it? Is it raining in the shed? We've got such a shitty storm here at the moment in the UK. It's absolutely diabolical. I've got heaters all running out. It's not that cold in here, but 10 degrees. Expected to be cold time of year, innit? But crap weather, crap storm coming over, wind, rain, dark. Well, it's not quite dark yet, getting colder, but yeah, I've never seen it. I've got this like little clock in the shed and it's got temperature, time, you know, obviously. Humidity 93%. Wow. Anyway, episode 3, springs. I know you know what they are. We've got that one, and we have 2. Now these are really fiddly on this car. Can you see them just about, I can't on my hand still, they're kind of like in there. They're like side pod springs, and don't forget the ones in the front there. If I can show you inside there, we've got the springs there as well, coupled with side dampers. So we won't go into much detail about these, but you've got your centre damper here and your 2 side ones here. Depending on what type you buy, as in what chassis you buy, it can differ slightly, but generally speaking, centre damper, 2 side dampers. Some of these cars have a centre like shock absorber. I wouldn't really know which one's better, to be honest. Now, what do you need to know about springs? As a rule of thumb, softer springs can make a car easier to drive. It's not always the fastest, but from experience, when I softened the front springs off, I found it, in my experience, it did turn into the corners slightly more controlled. The stiffer you go with the springs, generally, the more darty the car can be. I suppose you'll find the way that you would drive, depending on how softly sprung or how hard you will have your springs. For the most part, I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be any different, but the side springs, initially they'd be the same, wouldn't they, on each side? I don't quote me on this, but would you run different side springs? I don't know, because you're on a track that goes left and right. I would say no, but correct me if I'm wrong. But these side springs, which are in here, the most important thing that I found out without those is when the car is in a natural stance like this, they should be just off of the pod, like just resting on it. There should be no tension at all in the spring. So when you lift, say, this wheel here, if I lifted that up, it's going to compress this spring, but I can see through because I haven't got the battery in. The other spring, I can just make out we've got a very, very small amount of tension. As the pod goes down, it just releases the spring. So maybe there's some tweak in this chassis, which we need to talk about in another episode. And if I go the other way, lift this wheel, it will compress that spring. But I'm looking at the other spring now, this side. Yeah, I think, well, it's very marginal. I think these side pod springs are just resting on the rear pod of this structure. So to me, that's good enough. Now you can add tension to those springs, and this is the bit that I actually don't like this on the Schumacher Eclipse, and I've messed around with this for a long time. I'll see if I can show you. Little grub screw that goes into like a recess, which is what I would call a top hat, which is a coned recess that the spring clips onto. When you turn that, you can compress the spring. You can lower the spring down a bit or raise the spring. Now my understanding is you do not want these springs under tension whilst it's in a straight line, otherwise the car is not going to be stable in a straight line. Also, when you add power out of a corner, or like me, you would add power, it sounds like the rest of the guys that are quick are almost flat out, but coming out of a corner, if these were under tension, the car could sort of shoot off in one or other direction, depends on which tyre gripped. So it's quite imperative that those springs are not under tension when the car's sitting down the deck like this. Stiffer side pod springs can make the car more darty. I know there's more to it than that, and softer springs at the back especially can make the car more drivable, more forgiving. It's very much the same with the front springs. I can't remember what I did now, but I think from the standard springs that you get with the kit, I stiffened them up because I wanted my car to turn in more sharply, because I found it was understeering. So the last time I run this, I put stiffer springs on. Coupled with springs, you will have damper oil, thicker or thinner damper oil. So if you have with a softer spring, a thicker damper oil, you can get a different result. Harder springs, thinner oil, again you can fine tune your car to your liking. You can see that this has already been set up from when I'm going to next race, but I didn't actually get there because of work. I was just too busy. But you can see that if I push the front down here, it's got a very small amount of movement, but you can see that there is some give there. So even though these cars weigh next to nothing, there is a lot of movement. Now these type of cars are fairly similar in design as the Mardave Mini, the ones which have the pods and the springs on, and other, like, you know, Mardave make a lot of oval stuff like hot rods.
the GT12 obviously, they're all very much of this type of design with these side springs. An element of this pod, which is upper deck, if you think about it, you can have that like level, or I think it's anti-squat. I'll need to check my notes on that, give me a second. I'm just going to read off some notes here I've got. This rear droop, they call this a rear bump spring, I call it a droop spring, but it does the droop. So that, just to clarify, that spring is used to set the pod angle, adjust the spring tension so that the pod is horizontal when the car is flat. So that's really important, as I was saying. This gives the kit setting with 0 anti-squat, or they like to call it pro squat. So when that is, I mean, I can look down along the car here, I know that pod is level. You're not going to see it from there, but even a turn on, you're not going to see it, but the pod in there is level. If you put a harder bump spring, it can give you more initial steering. So I've just looked at my other notes. The standard spring, I did put that to slightly stiffer to aid with more turning. A softer spring there, perhaps what I had it at, would give a more aggressive mid-corner steering, and it will improve the car's bump handling ability. So to clarify, the front springs, softening the springs will ride the bumps better and generally allow the car to roll more, which will increase steering, especially in the middle of the corner, probably at the point when the car is at most, you know, you're turning in and the car's at its most sort of pitch. Because it will pitch going around the left hand bend, it's going to pitch up like that, isn't it? That's technically what it's going to do. Harder springs make the car more responsive, so less turning of the wheel makes the car dart around, and are more stable for high grip tracks. Now, I'm only raced at one track, so I don't really know what is high grip or low grip. It's just how it is. They will generally increase initial steering but improve mid-corner stability with the front springs. So it's what I was saying, softer springs, a little bit more forgiving. Harder springs makes the car dart around the track a little bit more. So with that in mind, the springs are quite important. If you're first starting out, what I would recommend is set the car, whatever kit you end up with its standard settings, and then go and use the car, because until you've got used to it, it don't really matter what springs you put on it. If you're a seasoned racer in other sort of disciplines, you might have a more of an understanding, but then you're not a beginner, even though you might not have done these before. But if you're a total beginner and you do LMP12, I would set it as the book. Whatever chassis you buy, the recommended settings, just leave it at that. The only sort of thing I would work on is 3mm ride height, about 1 mil of droop, somewhere around 42.5mm rear tyres, and about the same on the front if you get them turned down. So far, at least you know where you start. You've got like a point where you can start, and you know that you won't have deviated off that too much. It's important that you keep everything square, you know, the typical track and toe and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I would always recommend the standard kit settings springs for your chassis and go from there, because you need to get used to it first. Right, episode 4 will be soon, and that will be track. So the width for the front tyres, the track, and the width for the rear axle. So please like and subscribe, and I will see you for episode 4 very soon. Bye for now.